Well, Donald Trump is reportedly looking to Wall Street to shake up the military-industrial complex. Should be interesting how that works out. Joining me now is Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville. Senator, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Before we talk about whether Wall Street can work with the new administration to cut corners in the Pentagon, talk for a moment about how the Pentagon has become so stuck in their ways. The old revolving door between the generals who work at the Pentagon and then they go to work for the military contractors. I mean, we've been hearing that for decades, going way back to Eisenhower. Is it true, and is it time, or is it possible to break that up?
Well, you're exactly right, David. And the American people want it to happen. We saw that a couple of weeks ago when President Trump was elected. It was a mandate to change business as usual. We're losing money right and left, David. There's so much fraud. There's so much theft. You know, the defense agency, if you include the intelligence, is $1 trillion business, and it is out of control. We're spending, you know, when you hear $500 for a hammer, a lot of that is not true. But even if it's 20% true, the American people are sick and tired of it, and they want accountability, and we don't have any accountability right now. Nobody pays the price for making a mistake or losing money or money going out the door that's going places it shouldn't go.
And the problem is that not only is it just the money that's wasted, which is bad enough, but we're stuck with these outdated weapons system because not only are they protected by their friends in the military-industrial complex, and there's this revolving door that I talked about, but you also have a lot of members of Congress who get to rely on these contractor projects in their own districts, and they're very reticent to get rid of them, to bring in new blood. And that's why this Wall Street Journal piece was interesting, because it's talking about bringing in these new people who are on the cutting edge of weapons technology, who need to be given a chance in the Pentagon rather than relying on these old systems that are stuck with old politicians.
Well, you're exactly right. We need a COO. We need to shake it up. We need people in there that actually know a budget, know how to spend a budget, know how to be accountable for it. The American people deserve that. David, the problem we have coming up is space is the new frontier, and there's going to be trillions of dollars spent in the next 10, 15, 20 years on space because it's probably going to be where the next war happens. And we have to have somebody in there that's accountable for that. It's going to get more and more expensive to fight these wars, to defend our country, to train our people. Hopefully we get more people in the military that will protect this country. But again, go back to the American taxpayer. 30% of the money that comes into this to the federal government, 30% out of a dollar that the people, taxpayers send to Washington, D.C. is either stolen or is missing. And it's wrong. And the people are sick of it. And Donald Trump's going to try to do it. He's got good people that are interested in do it, but we got to give them the reins to get it done.
By the way, again, it's more than just money. You look at what's the problems that Trump is going to face as soon as he gets into office, with the Biden administration ratcheting up the war in Ukraine with these new weapons that he's giving to the Ukrainians to shoot missiles deep inside of Russia. And then, for God's sakes, landmines. I thought the UN had all lectured us about the awful danger to civilians of landmines. How does he deal with the new ratcheting up of the war in Ukraine that's been going on over the past couple of months?
Yeah, very disappointing in what the Biden administration is doing. I know behind the scenes, President Trump does have some of his people talking to people in the Biden administration. But, you know, right now, I'll just tell you this. Russia's losing 1,000 people a day. 1,000 people a day are dying in this war. That should never have been fought. And all we had to do was promise Vladimir Putin we would not make Ukraine NATO. But that's water underneath the bridge now. President Trump's got to get it over with. And one of the first things he has to do is sit down with President Putin, get it done, get a boundary that both Ukraine and Russia can live with, and get on with life. But we have destroyed the young people of Russia, the young people of Ukraine, and it's been devastating to our pocketbook. We have spent $211 billion, and only the world, if NATO's only spent about 52 billion. So look what the American taxpayer, David, has had to pay for this war as compared to everybody else all over the world, $52 billion. It's wrong, but we've got to get out of this, and the only one that can do it is Donald Trump.
By the way, one of the brainiacs who hasn't been mentioned as part of the administration yet is Rick Grenell, the former ambassador to Germany. Some people suggesting that he could be a roving ambassador for peace in places like Ukraine, in places like the Middle East. He's had a lot of experience in doing that, going back to his days at the UN. Do you think that's a position that could have some effect for the Trump administration?
Matt Whitaker obviously is in NATO. He's going to do a great job there. He's never been an ambassador before, but he understands the problem. First of all, you have to know the problem. And Rick Grenell, Matt Whitaker, these guys have been with President Trump. They know how he deals and works out things behind the scenes, and they'll all work together. Rick Grenell would be perfect to go to, to work with President Trump, side by side. But I'm going to tell you, to get this done, to get it out of the way, David, Donald J. Trump is the only one who's going to be able to put the signature on the line between Ukraine and Russia to make this thing work and get us out of this devastating loss of life and loss of money for both Ukraine, United States, and for Russia.
Then we have the intel agencies, and we got the Tulsi Gabbard picked to be the new DNI, the Director of National Intel. She, of course, has been attacked as being pro-Putin, and because of a trip she took to Syria back in 2015, a lot of stuff. In fact, the independent newspaper just considered her to be a Moscow-friendly MAGA warrior, whatever the hell that means, because after all, it was President Trump who blew up about 250 Russian mercenaries in Syria. It doesn't sound like he was very pro-Putin then, does it?
No. Tulsi Gabbard is in this position for intel. She's 20 years in. She understands it. But, David, you go back to one thing. The Democrats are going to do everything they possibly can to stop anybody. I don't care who President Trump puts up. They're going to try to throw up a roadblock November the 5th. It really was just war, and winning the war is going to be try to knock down all these neocons and Democrats in the next 4 or 5 months to get these wars under control and get people in place that can actually negotiate. We have no diplomacy in this country right now. Joe Biden's at the beach. Kamala Harris is in Hawaii. Who's running the ship? And people are dying every day, and American taxpayers' money is going out the door. We've got to end this stuff, but we got to get people in place that we all can trust, the American taxpayers, citizens of this country, and Tulsi Gabbard is one of those who can get the job done.
Senator Tommy Tuberville, wonderful to see you, sir. Have a wonderful, happy Thanksgiving.